The brass coin was worn smooth on both faces, a few words filed into it by hand, and the man who slept sitting up in the back of the last 47 bus kept it closed in his fist like it was the last warm thing he owned. Renee Brooks drove that route out of downtown Baltimore at 1:12 in the morning for 11 years, 19 cents an hour. And she let Khalil ride and asked him nothing and told no one. Nobody downtown had ever bothered to see either of them. She had no idea those few filed words would mean anything to anyone still alive. The next morning a man climbed the steps of her bus, a man whose foundation moved more money in a week than Renee would touch in 4 lifetimes. And his eyes went straight to the coin. Whatever he had come to say, he could not get it out. Not yet. Renee woke at 3:40 every afternoon, which is its own kind of strange, sleeping while the world worked and working while it slept. She kept the shades down with cardboard wedged in the gap because the sun off the row houses across Cherry Hill came in like a slap by noon. She'd lie there listening to Jalen move around the kitchen before his bus came, 8 years old. And already quiet the way kids get quiet when they've learned the house runs on somebody else's sleep. She'd make his lunch the night before. 2 slices of bread, the cheese cut so a single slice made 2 sandwiches, an apple if there were apples. She wrote a note on the napkin most days. Not always words. Sometimes just a star, drawn with the blue pen she kept by the bed because her mother had drawn stars on her napkins 45 years ago, in a kitchen in a town Renee had never seen, and some things you pass down without deciding to. Jalen was her daughter's boy. Tanya had been gone 2 years that March, and Renee did not talk about how, not because it was shameful, but because it was hers, and grief that you keep is grief that stays your own size. She'd taken the boy the week of the funeral. She had not asked anyone whether she could. She was 54 and her knees ached on the stairs, and she took him because that is what you do. Her mother used to say it plain, in the voice she used for things that were not up for discussion. You don't pass nobody by, not while you still got eyes in your head. Renee had spent her whole life finding out how much that sentence cost. At 11:20 each night, she walked the 4 blocks to the stop where she could catch a ride to the depot, because the express she would have taken cost $1.85 each way, and that was $3.70 a day. And $3.70 a day was a winter coat by November. So she walked. In August it was nothing. In February the wind came off the harbor and found the hole in her left boot, the one she'd patched twice with the rubber cement they sold at the corner store on Hanover. $4.19 a tube, and she'd done the math that you do not say out loud, the math about whether new boots came before or after Jalen's sneakers, and the boots always lost. She clocked in at 11:51. She drove the 6th evening shift on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the late loop the other 5 nights. And she knew her riders the way you know weather. The home health aides coming off 16-hour doubles, gray at the temples, asleep before the 3rd stop. The dishwashers from the 2 crab houses down by the water, smelling of bleach and old shellfish, $11 and change an hour and tips split 4 ways. The young ones in scrubs studying flashcards under the dome light, trying to become the next thing, exam in 9 days, a whole life riding on a card that said Mormal Saline on one side. There was a woman, Miss Carolyn, 71, who rode the 11:40 home from cleaning the federal building on Lombard and got off 2 stops early so she could sit on a bench and not climb the hill until her hip eased. Renee waited for her, idled the 40 extra seconds, kneeled the bus every time. There was a boy named Andre, maybe 19, who rode out to a warehouse job on the East Edge that started at 2 a.m., and one February night his card came up $65 short, and he started to step back off into the cold, embarrassed, and Renee waved him through and said, "You got it next time," and he had it next time, $0. 65 in nickels pressed into the fare box like an apology, and he rode that line another year and never once tried to ride free. People mostly don't when you treat them like they won't. Renee learned all of it. She did not learn it on purpose. It just happened the way it happens to anybody who shows up to the same 38-foot box for 11 years and actually looks at who climbs the steps. She learned slowly. The first winter, he was just a shape in the back, a man who paid his fare in coins, counted out careful, and then rode the full loop and rode it again. And Renee understood without anybody explaining it that the bus was warm and the night was 31 degrees and a man has to be somewhere. The rule said you couldn't sleep on the line. The rule said you rode to your stop and you got off. There was a notice taped by the farebox about it, laminated, curling at the corner. Renee had driven past 1,000 rules in her life that were written by people who had never once been cold. So she let him ride. He was maybe 63, hard to say, the kind of weathered that adds years. He kept himself neat in the way that cost effort when you've got nothing to keep yourself neat with. His coat was an old field jacket, olive gone to gray, and he had a way of sitting with his back straight even asleep. His chin dropped but his spine like he was still being inspected. Some nights he talked low to himself, names mostly, and a few words Renee couldn't place that she later figured were the alphabets soldiers use, the one where every letter is a word. He never asked her for a thing, not once in 3 winters. That was the part that got her. People who had everything asked her for things all day, asked her to wait, to kneel the bus, to explain why the transfer didn't work, asked with their whole chests. This man who had nothing asked for nothing. She started leaving food, not handing it to him. She knew better than that, knew the difference between a meal and a humiliation is mostly in how it's passed. She'd set a wrapped sandwich on the seat across from the farebox before her shift, like she'd forgotten it, like it was extra, and when the bus emptied at the downtown loop and it was just the 2 of them riding back out, she'd say, loud enough but not at him, I always pack too much. Boy at home eats like a grown man already. And she'd leave it there. And somewhere on the east leg of the loop it would be gone, and he'd say the only thing he ever said unprompted. Appreciate you, Miss Renee. In a voice you could have poured over biscuits, and she'd nod at the windshield and keep driving. She found out his name was Khalil because he told her, once, the second winter, when the heat in the bus died at the Patterson stop and they sat 10 minutes waiting on a relief vehicle and the cold crept in. He said, Khalil Jones, used to be sergeant, long time back. He said it the way you tell somebody your name when you've started to forget the sound of it being said. She said, Rennie, and he said, I know. It's on your badge. And that was the closest the 2 of them ever came to laughing. She did not report him. Not in 3 years. She knew that if she reported him, he would not get help. He would get a different bus or a bench, or the inside of the bus station until they cleared the bus station, and none of those were warmer than the back of the 47 with the heater running. She had learned a long time ago that the system was not a net. It was a list of reasons to say no, arranged by department. The coin she noticed in the second winter too. He turned it. That's how she clocked it, the way his thumb moved over something in his pocket the whole ride, a small circular motion, and one night under the dome light at the Long Red at Pulaski, she saw it, a brass disc, and he saw her see it, and he held it up without a word so she could look in the mirror. It was a coin like the ones units made, an eagle worn almost flat on the front. He turned it so she could see the back. Somebody had filed letters into the metal by hand, crude and deep, the way you'd carve a name in a tree, and she could just make out the shape of the words. You carry your people, he said, reading it for her, because she couldn't quite, or you carry nothing. That yours? She asked. No, ma'am, he said. And he closed his hand and did not say more, and she did not push, because the back of a bus at 1 in the morning is a kind of church, and you do not ask a man in church to show you everything at once. She thought about that coin more than she meant to. She thought about it folding Jalen's lunch. She thought about the words. You carry your people, or you carry nothing. Her mother could have said that. Her mother basically had, in her own way, in the kitchen with the stars on the napkins. Renee was a woman who carried people. She carried Jalen, and she carried her mother's memory, and she carried a busful of tired strangers safely home 5 nights a week. And she carried, she supposed, this man Khalil, a little in the only way she could afford to, a sandwich at a time, asking nothing back. She did not think of it as much. That was the thing about her you'd have missed if you only rode once. She did not think of it as anything at all. On Sundays she did not drive. On Sundays she took Jalen to the church on Carey Street, where her mother had taken her, and they sat in the third pew from the back, and after service the women fed everybody in the basement, foil pans of greens and cornbread, and the macaroni that Sister Beverly made too sweet on purpose because the children liked it. And Renee would fix 2 plates and slide one across to whoever was sitting alone, an old man, a new face the way you do, and not think about that either. Her hair she kept in 2-strand twists. She did herself at the kitchen table on Saturday nights with the radio low, the boy already in bed, her fingers moving on their own while her mind went where it went. She tied it under a satin scarf to sleep. Small things. The kind of small things that hold a life together when the big things have all come apart. Jalen was struggling in the 3rd grade, not because he wasn't smart, but because grief makes a child quiet, and quiet children yet get marked absent even when they're sitting right there. His teacher called twice. Renee took the 7 a.m. meeting both times after working till 2, sat in a chair built for an 8-year-old with her eyes burning, and said, "Yes, ma'am, and we'll work on it," and then came home and worked on it. The 2 of them at the kitchen table over a workbook, $6.99 from the drugstore, doing 5 problems a night because 5 was a number a tired boy could hold. The night he got all 5 right, she let him stay up to 9:30, and they split a can of peaches, 89 cents, like it was steak. He asked her that night, around a mouthful, "You ever get scared, Granny?" And she said, "Every single day, baby," because she did not believe in lying to children about the weather. "Then how come you not scared acting?" And Renee thought about that a while and said the only true thing she had. 'Cause scared and stopping ain't the same. You can be scared and still drive the bus. He chewed on that the way he chewed the peaches. She drew him a star on the napkin the next morning, blue pen, same as always. Money was a wall she stood at every single day. Rent on the place in Cherry Hill was $940 and went up $35 springst Tanya died, which felt like a thing the world did on purpose just to see if she'd fold. The lights ran $80, $130 depending on the season. The phone was $44. Jalen needed glasses in October, $211 after the part the card covered, and she'd paid it off at $20 a month into the next summer, which is to say she paid for her grandson's eyes $20 at a time for 11 months. And she knew the price of everything, and she did not complain about any of it. Not because she was a saint, but because complaining cost breath, and breath was the one thing she still owned outright. When the supervisor cut her Thursday overtime that fall, $61 a week, she went home and did the math at the kitchen table with the same blue pen. 61 times 4 is $244 a month is the gas bill, plus the workbook, plus most of a pair of sneakers. And then she put the pen down and made Jalen's lunch and drew a star on the napkin and went to bed at 5 a.m. with the sun coming up wrong, and got up at 3:40 and did it again. That was Renee. A woman the city looked straight through. A woman who showed up. And on the far side of that same city, in a glass building she would never have reason to enter, a man was about to come apart over a coin she'd seen turning in a sleeping stranger's hand, and he didn't know it yet either. His name was Malcolm Reeves, and 41 years before any of this, he had been a boy who rode this exact line to school. People who met General Reeves in the building on Pratt Street, the foundation that bore a corporate name and moved logistics, contracts, and disaster supply chains, and called itself a force for good in its glossy reports. Those people saw a man built out of certainty. 61 years old, 2 stars he'd earned, and a third he'd been passed over for, retired now into the kind of board seats and advisory roles that find men like him. Tall. Still, he stood when others slouched. He had a voice that ended conversations. He gave to causes, veterans' causes mostly. And his name was on a plaque or two. And if you'd asked anyone in that building whether Malcolm Reeves carried any grief, they'd have laughed. Because the man was a fortress, and fortresses don't grieve. They just hold. But Malcolm Reeves had grown up 9 blocks from Renee's stop. In a 2-room place his mother kept by cleaning other people's houses, and he and his younger brother had ridden the city line to school on tokens. Their mother counted into their palms each morning, like she was handing them something holy. Their father was a name and not much more. Their mother, Ruth Reeves, was everything. She worked herself down to bone, and she did it without theater. And she had a saying, one saying, that she said so often it had stopped being words and become weather in that house. She'd say it at the door when they left. She'd say it when they fought, which was often 2 brothers 2 years apart in a space too small for both their tempers. She'd take Malcolm by the chin, the older one, the responsible one, the one she'd decided early was going to get them out, and she'd say it slow so it would set. You carry your people, or you carry nothing. She'd had it filed into a coin, even. There was a man at her church who'd done a turn in the service and kept the unit coins, and one Christmas when the boys were teenagers, Ruth had asked him to file her own words into the back of one, and she'd given it to the younger boy, to Terrell, because Terrell was the one she worried for. Terrell, who felt everything too loud, who cried at the radio, who could not seem to build the hard shell the world demanded of a black boy in that city. She gave the coin to Terrell and the lesson to Malcolm, and maybe that was the first mistake, splitting the one thing in 2, because Malcolm took the lesson and made it into armor, and Terrell took the coin and made it into a wound. Malcolm remembered the mornings the clearest, 6:15, the 2 of them at the door in coats too thin for January, and Ruth counting tokens into their palms. 2 for Malcolm, 2 for Terrell, the round trip, no margin. And if you lost one, you walked the 31 blocks, and you did not lose one, twice. He remembered the line, the old line that ran where the 47 ran now, the same turn at Plasaski, the same long red. He remembered being 14, and Terrell 12, and a bigger boy taking Terrell's token at the back of the bus. Terrell just letting it go. And Malcolm making him take it back, making him stand up, hissing, carry yourself, and Terrell crying the silent way he cried, and Ruth that night taking Malcolm's chin in her hand, not Terrell's, and saying the words like a correction. You carry your people, or you carry nothing. Malcolm heard it as you are responsible for your brother. He did not hear the other half, the halves that said, and your brother is people, not weight. He was 14. He heard what a scared 14-year-old hears, and then he spent 47 years never going back to check whether he'd heard it right. Malcolm got out. That was the story he told, the one in the foundation bio, the one he believed. Enlisted at 18, the discipline taking to him like he'd been built for it. The way up the long ladder, 4 deployments, 23 years to his first star, the commands, the second star, the third he was passed over for at 58. He sent money home, $300 a month for years, then $600. Then enough that his mother could stop cleaning houses at 67, though she never fully did. He paid off the place. He buried her in good ground at 71 when her heart gave out, and he stood at the grave in his dress uniform with the folded flag and the 3 rifle volleys, and he did not cry, and afterward people told him how strong he was, how proud Ruth would have been, and he let them, because what was the alternative? Terrell did not get out. Terrell enlisted too, 2 years behind, partly because his brother had, partly because there was nothing else, and Terrell went to the places they sent young men. And Terrell came back the way some of them come back, with the lights on but somebody else moving the furniture around inside. He came back to a Baltimore that had no use for what he'd become. The shell Malcolm had built so easily, Terrell could never get to set. He drank, and then he didn't, and then he did. He held jobs for a while. He showed up at Malcolm's, once, twice, 3 times, asking for things, and here is where the lesson curdled. Because somewhere along the climb, Malcolm had taken his mother's words and turned them inside out without ever noticing he'd done it. You carry your people, or you carry nothing. That's what Ruth meant, that a man without his people is a man with nothing, that the carrying is the point, the carrying is the whole of it. But Malcolm, who had carried so much, who had carried the family out on his own back the way he saw it, had built a different sentence out of the same words. His sentence went, "You carry what's worth carrying. You hold the line. You don't carry dead weight." He said it to Terrell. Not in those words, the first time. The first time he said it gentle. It was a Tuesday in March, and Terrell stood on Malcolm's porch in Virginia, 41 years old and looking 55, the field jacket already worn, and he asked for $400 and a place to land for a week, just a week, till the next thing. And Malcolm, who had $400 in his wallet and 6 bedrooms behind him, said, "I can't keep doing this." He said, "You have to want it." He said, "I have my own family now, my own command. I can't be your safety net." All the reasonable things, all the things a strong man says to a drowning one. He gave Terrell $200, half, the way you do when you want to feel you gave and also feel you held the line, and Terrell looked at the 2 bills a long time, 11 seconds maybe, and then folded them once and put them in the jacket and said, quiet, "You still got Mama's words wrong, Malcolm. She didn't mean it the way you carry it." And he turned and walked down the 5 porch steps, and Malcolm let him go, told himself it was tough love, told himself the boy would stand once he had to, and shut the door. That was the last time. 9 years ago that March. Terrell, who felt everything too loud, heard exactly what was underneath the reasonable words. "You are weight, and I am done carrying you." And Terrell stopped coming around. And Malcolm told himself that was Terrell respecting the boundary, and went back to his command and his climb and the clean, hard shell of his life. He did not know where his brother slept after that. He told himself he didn't need to. He held the line. You'd have to understand that Malcolm was not a cruel man. That's the thing the building got right and wrong at once. The cruelty in him was not hatred. It was a door he'd shut and walled over because behind it was a grief so large he was certain it would end him, and he was a man who had organized his entire life around not being ended. He gave to veterans' causes precisely because he could not look at the one veteran who shared his blood. He wrote checks to the abstraction so he would never have to find the man. That's a kind of mercy you do for yourself, dressed up as mercy for others. And Malcolm had been doing it for 9 years. Ever since the night a county office 2 states away had called the only next of kin in the file and told him his brother had died alone. No fixed address, and asked what he wanted done with the remains. He'd had Terrell buried. Quietly. He had not gone. He sent money for a stone and never saw the stone, and he came back to his desk the next morning and held the line, and the door stayed walled, and the only thing that ever got through it, on the bad nights, was a single sentence in his mother's voice, her hand on his chin. "You carry your people," and he would pour a drink and not finish it, and go to bed certain. He had no idea where the coin had ended up, the coin she'd filed by hand and given to the wrong son, the coin that was, at that moment, turning slowly in the fist of a sleeping man on the last bus of the 47 line. 9 blocks from where it all began. The cold came early that year. By the first week of December, the late loop ran at 29-30 degrees, and Khalil rode every night, and Renee left the sandwich every night, and the system, which is patient and indifferent and made of people who are mostly just doing their jobs, finally noticed. His name was Mr. Doyle, the supervisor, and he was not a bad man, which is almost always the case. He had enough to hit and complaints to log, and a job he could lose. There'd been a rider complaint. Somebody downtown who didn't like a sleeping man in back, and the complaint became a note, and the note became a ride-along. And on the 2nd Tuesday of December, Mr. Doyle was standing at the front of Renee's bus, the downtown loop, at 1:40 in the morning with a clipboard, watching Khalil sleep in back with his chin down and his spine straight and his fist closed. "You know him?" Doyle asked. "He's a rider," Renee said. She kept her eyes on the mirror. The bus idled. The heater ticked. He's been on the full loop. Twice. That's a violation. You're supposed to clear them at the terminus. Doyle wasn't unkind about it. He said it the way you read off a rule you didn't write. I need you to wake him, have him exit at the loop. If he won't, we call it in. Renee did not move. Out the windshield, the loop was empty, the closed shops, the one streetlight that buzzed, the cold welcome of the pavement in a way you could almost see. Behind her, a man who had asked her for nothing in 3 winters slept holding the only thing he owned, and Renee Brooks, who had spent 54 years learning the exact weight of the word no, when it falls on people who have run out of room, sat very still. She counted it later in her own head the way you do. 40 seconds. She sat there 40 seconds with the supervisor at her shoulder and her hands at 10 and 2 on a wheel that wasn't moving. And she did the math, the real math, the only math she'd ever cared about, the math her mother had drawn on a napkin in a town Renee had never seen. What does it cost me? What does it cost him? Who can afford it? Mr. Doyle, she said finally, still watching the mirror. It's 29 degrees. He paid his fare. I'll ride him to the eastern stop and let him off there, where the shelter van comes at 4. That's the warmest place between here and there, and you know it. That's not the procedure. No, sir, Renee said, it's not, and she put the bus in gear. She'd half expected him to write her up right there. He didn't. He stood a second longer, and something moved behind his face, some private arithmetic of his own. And then he sat down across from the farebox, on the seat where she usually left the sandwich, and rode the east legs silent sighs, and got off at the eastern stop without a word and walked to his car. He did not call it in. He logged the violation, because he had to, a small mark in a system that would forget Renee until it didn't. But he did not call it in. People are like that more than the rules make room for. They look at a thing up close and the rule loosens in their hands. Renee drove the rest of that loop with her jaw set. She was not proud of herself, exactly. Pride was a thing other people had room for. What she felt was closer to the way you feel after you've carried something heavy up a flight of stairs. That low ache that is almost satisfaction and almost just tired. She thought about the $61 a week they'd already taken, and what a write-up could take next. And she thought about Jalen's sneakers, size 3 now, the toe wearing through on the left same as her boot. And she understood with no drama at all that she had just put a stranger's 1 warm hour above her own grandchild's shoes. And she did the math on that too. At the long red at Pulaski, 38 seconds of green to red to green, and the math did not come out clean. The math never came out clean, and she did it anyway and got the same answer she always got. You don't pass nobody by. Not while you still got eyes. Her mother had not said it would be free. Her mother had only said it was the rule above the rule. Khalil woke as the bus slowed at the eastern stop. He always woke clean, no startle, just present. The way men who've stood watch learn to surface. He gathered himself, the field jacket, the small bag, and as he came up the aisle he paused at the front, which he never did, and he set something down on the metal shelf by the farebox. It was the coin. Cold's coming hard this week, he said. Might not make the loop some nights. You hold that for me, Miss Renee. So, I got a reason to come back for it. He smiled, and it was a real one, the kind that costs a man like him to spend. It's the only thing I never could put down. And he stepped off into the 27-degree dark and walked toward where the shelter van would come at 4, his back straight, asking nothing. And Renee sat at the eastern stop with a dead engine ticking and a brass coin in her palm, the eagle worn flat. The words filed deep into the back. You carry your people or you carry nothing. And she did not know. Could not have known that she was now holding the exact center of another family's whole broken history in the hand she used to fold a boy's lunch. She put it in her coat pocket, the left one, over the patched boot close to the part of her that carried things. She finished the loop. She drove home as the sky went gray. She made Jalen's lunch and drew a star on the napkin and turned the coin over once before she slept. reading the words again in the dark by feel. And somewhere across the city, in a glass building on Pratt Street, a general she had never met was waking from the same dream he'd had for 9 years, the one where his mother takes his chin in her hand. And he could not have told you why. That particular morning, the dream felt so close he could smell the kitchen. For 3 weeks the coin rode in Renee's pocket, and Khalil did not come back for it. The cold did what the cold does. Some nights the loop ran near zero with the wind, and the bus filled with the home health aides and the dishwashers and the students, and the seat by the farebox stayed empty. And Renee left the sandwich anyway, out of habit, out of hope, and carried it back home uneaten and gave it to Jalen, who never asked why his grandmother packed 2 lunches some mornings and 1 on others. She told herself Khalil had found the shelter, that he was warm somewhere, that men who'd survived what he'd survived knew how to survive a winter. She told herself this the way you tell yourself things you need and cannot prove. And here is where the 2 worlds, the woman with the coin and the man whose mother had filed it, came within a hand's width of each other and did not touch. The foundation on Pratt Street ran a program, the kind of program that looks excellent in a report. It funded transit vouchers for veterans, partnered with the City Line, put its corporate name on a banner at the depot. There was a flyer for it tapped up in the driver's break room. Between the schedule swaps and the union notice, a clean, glossy thing with a photo of a smiling older man in a clean field jacket who was nobody, a model, and the words "A ride home for those who also served." Renee had read that flyer 30 times waiting on her coffee, 0.75s from the machine that ate every 5th quarter. After Khalil gave her the coin, she read it differently. She thought, 3 weeks running, that maybe she should call the number at the bottom, that maybe a man who'd been a sergeant could get a voucher, a real one, away off the 112 loop and into somewhere with a bed. She copied the number onto the back of a transfer slip. She called it twice on her 1 break. The first time it rang 14 times. The second time a recording told her the line's hours were 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, which is to say the exact hours a woman who drives till 2 a.m. and raises a boy is dead asleep, and the exact hours a man sleeping on a bus has no phone to call from anyway. She folded the transfer slip into her coat pocket next to the coin. And that was as close as the program ever came to the people on the flyer. Twice that month Malcolm Reeves himself came to that depot, to a photograph, to a handshake, to a check the size of which made the local paper $250,000 over 3 years. He stood in the same garage where Renee clocked in at 11:51 5 nights a week. He stood one afternoon at 2:40, not 30 feet from the locker where her patched boots dried, and he shook the hand of Mr. Doyle, who did not mention the sleeping veteran on the 47, because why would he? It was a closed matter, a logged violation, a thing the system had swallowed. Malcolm signed the banner and praised the drivers, the unsung backbone of the city. He called them the people who show up, and he meant it the abstract way mean things about people they will never have to know. He did not ride the 40 cents. Generals do not ride the last bus. He got in a car with tinted glass and went back to the building, and somewhere on the eastbound platform a woman he had just praised in general terms walked past him with her head down and a brass coin in her coat pocket that he would have died to hold, and neither of them turned, because that is the cruelty the story is really about, the one with no villain in it at all. 2 people standing 30 feet apart, joined by a circle of brass and a dead man and a mother's sentence, and the whole machinery of the world arranged so they would look straight through each other. Renee clocked in. The general drove off. The coin rode east into the dark on the 112 loop, turning in no one's hand now, just lying still in the pocket of a woman who carried things, waiting for the morning, still weeks away, when a sleeping veteran's empty seat and a 2-star general's grief would finally have to share the same warm bus. Khalil came back on the 9th of January after the worst of the cold had broken, and after 11 days Renee did not know about. 11 days on a cot in the shelter clinic with pneumonia sitting on his chest like a man. He climbed the steps of the 112 loop slower than she remembered, thinner, and he paid his fare in coins counted out careful as ever, and he rode the full loop in back without a word until the bus emptied at the downtown terminus. And it was just the two of them again on the east leg. The way it had been for 3 winters. He came up and sat across from the farebox, on the seat where the sandwich used to go. "You still got it," he said. She took the coin out of her left pocket, where it had ridden 24 nights, warm now from being carried by a person, and she set it on the metal shelf between them. He picked it up. His thumb found the worn eagle on its owns, the way a thumb finds the thing it has done 10,000 times, and something in his shoulders came down half an inch. "Thought you might not come back for it," Renee said. "Was sick, wasn't ready to be done." He turned it over. "And I ain't ready yet." She drove. The streetlights ran by, 38 of them between the terminus and Pulaski. She could have told you. And then Khalil started talking. The way men talk on the back of a bus at 1:40 in the morning when nobody's going to fix them, and nobody's going to write it down. "This ain't mine," he said. "Belonged to a man named Terrell Reeves. Knew him going on 6 yearsers, off and on, the shelters, the lines, the bad winters. He was Army, like me, only it broke him different than it broke me. Some men it makes hard. Terrell it just made tender, and the world ain't kind to a tender man with no door to close." He held the coin up to the dome light at the long red. "His mama filed them words in there herself. He told me that 40 times if he told me once. Said she gave it to him 'cause she was scared for him. Said his brother got the words and he got the coin, and he always figured he got the better end, 'cause you can lose words, but he never could lose this." Renee did not interrupt. She kept her eyes on the mirror, and she just listened, which is the whole of what most people need and the last thing most people get. "He passed 2 winters back," Khalil said. "January, like now, I was with him. Wasn't pretty, and it wasn't a movie. He give me this the last night, and he said, 'Khalil, you find my brother. You tell him I wasn't mad. You tell him I understood even, and you give him this so he know it's true.'" Khalil closed his hand. "His brother went and made general, big man now, foundation, all that. I seen his picture in the paper once, standing by some banner." He laughed low with no joy in it. "Now you tell me. How's a man look like me walk up to a man look like that and say I knew your dead brother and he forgave you? They'd have me out the lobby before I got his name out my mouth. So I've been carrying it. 6 years his and 2 years mine. Carrying it for a man too big to find." Renee's hands were very still on the wheel. She did not say what she could have said. She did not say, "I have stood 30 feet from that man, holding that coin in my coat." She did not say, "I called his foundation twice, and it rang 14 times. Some things you do not say in the middle of a man's confession, because they are not about you. She only said, after a while, the truest small thing she had. "You carried him further than anybody. That counts." "Maybe," Khalil said. He rode to the eastern stop. He kept the coin this time. He stepped down into the 33-degree dark, back straight, asking nothing, and Renee drove the empty bus the rest of the way out with one word turning in her chest like a coin of its own, Reeves. She knew that name. She had read it on a glossy flyer 30 times waiting on her coffee. The morning came 9 days later, the 18th, and it came the way these things do, sideways, with no warning that it was the morning. The foundation had arranged it for the cameras. A general, retired, going home to ride the city line he'd ridden to school as a boy, the unsung backbone, all that. A photographer. A young woman with a handler from the foundation, a 5:48 a.m. Departure chosen because the light off the harbor was good then, and the bus would be near empty and clean for the shot. They picked the 47 because the 47 ran where the old line had run. They did not pick the driver. The driver was whoever had the early tripper, and that week the early tripper was Renee, because the $61 overtime she'd lost in the fall had opened back up as a 2-hour morning run, and she had taken it the day it posted. $38 a morning. Jalen's sneakers, the gas bill. So at 5:48 a.m., General Malcolm Reeves climbed the steps of Renee Brooks's bus. He was exactly as tall as the paper said. He stood while the handler explained the shot. He had a coat that cost more than Renee made in a month, and a face that had ended 1,000 conversations, and underneath it, if you'd driven a night bus for 11 years and learned to read tired the way Renee had, you could see a man who had not slept right in a long time. He nodded at Renee the way powerful men nod at staff, kind and through her at once, and he sat in the third row for the light, in the back, where he always was, where he had ridden through the night because the clinic bed was needed and the cold was breaking, and a man has to be somewhere. Khalil Jones was asleep, sitting up, chin down, spine straight, his fist closed around a brass coin. The handler said the name for the photographer, checking her notes. General Reeves is fine with the wide shot first, then. Reeves. Renee's hand went to her empty left pocket. The coin wasn't there. The coin was 30 feet behind her in the fist of a sleeping man, and the man asleep in the third row was the brother too big to find. And Terrell Reeves had told a homeless friend, "Find my brother," and the friend had carried it 6 years and 2 more and given up. And now they were on the same warm bus in the gray light, and not one of them knew but her. She looked in the mirror. She found Khalil's reflection in the back. "Khalil," she said. Just his name, the way you'd say it to wake a man gentle. The handler glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "Khalil, that general, your friend's brother. What did you say his brother's name was?" Khalil surfaced the way he always did. No startle, just there. He looked toward the front. He looked at the man in the third row, the coat, the posture, the face, and Renee watched the recognition climb him slow, watched him match it against a photograph Terrell had carried folded soft, against a face described to him 40 times on 40 cold nights. And Khalil went absolutely still. 11 years she'd watched men sleep and wake on her bus, and she had never seen a stillness like the one that came over Khalil Jones in that third winter at 5:51 in the morning. He stood. He came up the aisle. The handler rose to stop him, said, "Sir, this is a private." And Khalil walked past her like she was made of weather, and he stopped at the third row, and he looked down at the general, and he said it plain, the way you say a thing you have carried, until it has worn your hands smooth. "You, Terrell's people." Malcolm Reeves looked up at a thin black man in a field jacket gone gray and did not understand, and then began terribly to understand. "He told me find you," Khalil said. 6 years I knew him. I was there the last night. He wasn't mad. He told me to tell you that. He said tell him I understood." And Khalil opened his hand, and there in the palm worn smooth from carrying lay the coin, the eagle flat, and he turned it so the back showed it in the harbor light. The words his friend's mother had filed by hand into the metal with her own 2 hands, so they could never be lost. "You carry your people, or you carry nothing." Malcolm Reeves did not reach for it. His hands had stopped working. He looked at his mother's handwriting, the crude, deep letters, the words he had taken and turned inside out and built a whole armored life out of, and the breath went out of him like a tire. "Where?" he said. It was the only word he had. "Where is he?" 2 winters back, Khalil said. Gentle now, because he had done this before. He had broken news like this to people in shelters and waiting rooms, and he knew you say it soft. "He's gone, General. He's been gone 2 years. I'm sorry. He waited on you a long time. He waited, and then he forgave you, and then he was just tired." And on a city bus parked at the curb at 5:52 in the morning, in the good light, the photographer had been brought to capture and was no longer capturing because she had quietly lowered her camera and put her hand over her mouth. General Malcolm Reeves took the brass coin from a homeless man's palm and held it in both hands, the way you hold something that has come back from very far away. And for the first time in 9 years he cried. Not the way men cry in films, with a single noble tear. The way it actually sounds when a wall that has held for 9 years finally gives, in a kitchen, on a bus, at dawn, ugly and quiet and from somewhere below the ribs. He read the words off the back through it. "You carry your people." He had carried everything: the family, the command, the foundation, the abstraction of every veteran in the city. Everything except the one man who shared his blood, the one he had decided at 14 he was responsible for, and then decided at 50 was dead weight. And the two sentences had never been different sentences. They had always been the same sentence, his mother's sentence, and he had spent his whole life proving he could not tell them apart. I sent money, he said, to no one, to the coin. I gave to every, I wrote checks to. I know, Khalil said, I seen the banner. I couldn't look at him. Malcolm's voice came apart on the last word. If I looked at him, I'd have to carry him, and I didn't think I'd survive it, so I. He stopped. He pressed the coin to his mouth. The handler was crying now too and pretending not to. Renee sat in the driver's seat with her hands at 10 and 2 on a wheel that wasn't moving, and she let the silence be, because she had learned long ago that the back of a bus is a kind of church, and a man weeping in church does not need your words. He needs your presence. And presence was the one thing Renee Brooks had been giving away free her entire life. He cried until he was empty, which took a while. Then he wiped his face with the back of a hand that had pinned on 2 stars, and he looked for the first time at the woman driving. You knew, he said. You said his name to him. I had the coin a while, Renee said. He left it with me to keep. I didn't put it together till he told me your brother's name. 9 days ago. She paused. I called your program twice, trying to get him a bed. It rang 14 times the first time and told me you were closed the second. Malcolm Reeves looked at her for a long moment, and what was in his face was not the kindness powerful men aim through you. It was a man seeing another person for the first time, all the way to the back. What's your name, he said. Renee Brooks. Renee. He said it like he was learning it. How long have you been letting him sleep back there? 3 winters. Why? And Renee, who did not have a foundation or a banner or a single check to her name, who made $19 an hour and walked 4 blocks to save $3.70 and had carried his whole family's broken history in the pocket over her patched boot, told him the only thing that was ever true. 'Cause it was 29 degrees, she said, and he'd paid his fare, and my mama told me you don't pass nobody by while you still got eyes. Wasn't nothing else to it, General. There never is. People just make it complicated so they got a reason to drive on past. What came after did not come fast, and it did not come like a fairy tale, because Renee Brooks would not let it. Malcolm Reeves was a man who knew how to move money, and his first instinct was the instinct of his class, which is to write a number on a check and feel the relief of having done something. He came to the depot the following week, found Renee on her break with her and 75 coffee, and tried to hand her an envelope. She didn't open it. She could tell by the weight of a thing like that what it was for, which was him, not her. I don't take what I haven't earned, she said, and slid it back across the break room table, past the glossy flyer that still said a ride home for those served. You want to do something with that money, I'll tell you exactly where it goes. It don't go to me. Then where? That line on your flyer. She tapped it. Answers 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. You know who's cold at 9 to 5, Monday to Friday? Nobody, 'cause the sun's up and the offices are open. Cold comes at 1 in the morning on the back of my bus. Your help got to be where the people are when the people need it, or it ain't help, it's a photograz. Khalil knew that line existed, and it never once did him a lick of good. He didn't need a check, General. He needed somebody to ride the bus at 1 a.m. and know what they were looking at. Malcolm Reeves was quiet a while. Then he said, would he do it, Khalil? Would he ride the buses, for pay? You go ask him yourself, Renee said. And you don't hand it to him like charity or he'll walk. You offer him a job and a wage and 90 days to prove he can hold it, same as you'd offer anybody you respected. That man's been doing that work for free for years, breaking bad news soft in shelters. Pay him for it. So that is what Malcolm did, because for once in his life he listened to somebody who had nothing. He found Khalil at the shelter on the 11th, and he did not offer him a coin or a check, or his guilt dressed up as generosity. He offered him work, $21 an hour, an outreach navigator riding the night lines from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., finding the men in the backs of buses and knowing, because he'd been one, exactly what to say and what not to say, and when to just sit there and not interrupt. He offered a room Khalil would pay rent toward out of his own wage, $300 a month, because a man stands straighter in a room he's paying for. And he offered 90 days. No promises past that. Prove it or don't. Khalil looked at him a long 11 seconds, the same 11 seconds his friend had once looked at 2 folded bills on a porch in Virginia, and then he said, "I'll take the work. I ain't taking the pity. We clear on that?" "We're clear." "Sir," Malcolm said, and the two of them shook on it, the general and the sergeant, and somewhere General Reeves was not there to see it. And that was the part neither of them would ever get back, and both of them knew it, and they shook anyway. Khalil's first week he found a man on the 22 line, a younger one, 34, 3 deployments, and a discharge that hadn't gone right, riding the 2 a.m. loop with everything he owned in a 30-gallon bag. Khalil did not lead with a pamphlet. He sat 2 seats back and said nothing for 11 minutes, the whole east leg, and then he said, "Cold one tonight." And the man said nothing, and Khalil said, "I rode this same kind of seat 4 winters. Ain't no shame in a warm seat." And by the eastern stop the man was talking, not much, but talking, and Khalil walked him to the 4 a.m. van personally, the way nobody had ever walked Khalil anywhere. He logged it the next day in the careful hand of a man who'd had to relearn that his name mattered on a form. 1. He counted them like that, one at a time, the way Renee counted streetlights and Ruth Reeves had counted tokens into 2 small palms. You do not save a city. You carry the one in front of you. Then you carry the next one. For Renee, Malcolm learned, the only door she would walk through was the one with her grandson on the other side. She would not be rescued out of her life. She liked her life was the thing he could not at first understand. She liked her riders and her loop and the boy and the third pew. So he did the one thing she allowed, which was to set up a fund for Jalen's schooling, drawn down only against real things, books, fees, a future, administered by the church on Carey Street, so it was never his hand-giving, and her hand-taking but only a community keeping one of its children. Renee accepted that, and she let him buy one thing for her, exactly one, after he asked 3 times. A pair of boots, $94, the good kind, waterproof, because winter was long and the loop was cold, and her left foot had been wet for 2 years. She wore them the next night. She did not mention it, but she walked the 4 blocks to the stop a little easier, and that was a thing he had done, a small true thing, and it was worth more to him than the $250,000 the paper had printed his name beside. He named it after his brother. The General Reeves Initiative, the words cast in bronze over the door of a storefront office on the east of the 47 line, 2 stops from where Khalil got off each night for 3 winters. Under the name in the same plain letters Ruth Reeves had once filed by hand into a coin, they cast the sentence whole the way she'd meant it, never to be lost again. You carry your people or you carry nothing. They opened it on a Saturday in May. No ribbon, no podium, because Renee had said a podium would turn it back into a photograph, and Malcolm had finally learned to listen to her. There were maybe 40 people, folding chairs from the church on Carey Street, Sister Beverly's macaroni in a foil pan because some things travel. Renee came in her good boots with Jalen beside her in new glasses, $211 worth of glasses paid off $20 at a time, and the boy stood reading the bronze over the door, sounding it out the way he sounded out his 5 problems a night. You carry your people, he read. Slow? Or you carry nothing. He looked up at his grandmother. That's like what you say, about not passing nobody by. It's the same thing, baby, Renee said. Most everything true is the same thing said different. Malcolm Reeves stood at the back where Renee usually stood, the 3rd pew distance, and watched an 8-year-old read his mother's words off a wall and held himself together by a thread and did not bother hiding it anymore. Khalil pinned the bronze plaque straight with a level, and his friend's coin, warm in his pocket, the original, where it would stay, because Terrell had given it to him, and a gift is a gift. The cast copy was already on a desk on Pratt Street, heavier than any award. The loop had closed. The thing that had ridden in a sleeping man's fist and a bus driver's pocket, and passed within 30 feet of the one man who needed it most, was finally fixed to a wall where the cold people could read it on their way in from the dark. It did not fix the city. Renee would have told you that herself, would have told you that hard, because she did not believe in fairy tales, and she had buried a daughter, and she knew the difference between a happy ending and a good morning. But in its first 7 months, the initiative put navigators on 6 night lines, and they found 312 men and women who had been riding the dark to stay warm, and 41 of them slept under a roof by spring who had not had one in years, and the phone line answered at 2 a.m. now and answered by people who had once needed it to and never got it. Small numbers, real ones, not the kind you put on a banner, the kind you count one cold person at a time. Khalil made his 90 days, and then he made 90 more. He rode the 11 to 4, and he found the next Terrell and the one after that, and he kept his friend's coin in his own pocket, where it belonged, because Terrell had given it to him, and a gift is a gift. But he had a jeweler make one cast copy, just one, and that copy he gave to Malcolm, who kept it on his desk in the building on Pratt Street, where it sat heavier than any award on the wall behind it. And Renee kept driving. Of course she kept driving. The spring came and the cold broke, and she ran her loop 5 nights a week, and made Jalen's lunch and drew a star on the napkin, and one warm night in April there was a new shape in the back of her bus. A young woman this time, riding the full loop with a child asleep against her, and Renee left a sandwich on the seat by the farebox and said, "To nobody, loud enough, I always pack too much." And somewhere on the east leg it was gone. And at the eastern stop a navigator in a clean field jacket climbed aboard, because Khalil had the schedule of every nightline memorized now, and he tipped his head at Renee in the mirror and went to the back to sit with the woman and the child and not interrupt and just be there. The way you do, the way she'd taught a whole city to do, one cold night at a time, without ever once meaning to teach anybody anything. If you have ever ridden past someone on the worst night of their life and told yourself it wasn't your bus to stop, this story was about you. It was about me too. It is about all of us, because the truth is that the people we walk past are almost never strangers. They are someone's whole world, carried or dropped depending on who happens to be driving. So here is the question, and there is no clean answer to it, which is exactly why it is worth asking. Malcolm Reeves gave to every veteran in the city so that he would never have to find the one in his own blood. Was that the worst kind of cowardice, paying a fortune to not look at his brother's face? Or was it the only way a breaking man could keep standing? And does a person get to be forgiven? On the one morning it finally costs him everything, when a stranger he never noticed had been carrying his absolution in her coat pocket the whole time. And the harder question still. If Khalil had never boarded that bus, if Renee had reported him that first cold night the way the rules said to, would Malcolm ever have deserved to know he'd been forgiven at all? Tell me where you land. The ones who carry, and the ones who get carried, and the ones who only ever drive on past. There's one line in tonight's story I keep coming back to. I'm not sure I got it right. It's something the bus driver says near the end. A man asks her why she let him sleep back there for 3 winters, and she's the cheesepeep just make it complicatedst. The thing is, I think a reason to drive on past. I drive past people all week. Not the big stuff. Not the big stuff. The small stuff mostly. I tell myself I'm busy. I tell myself it isn't my stop. I rode a general into this one who gave money to every veteran in the city except the one who shared his blood. And here's what I'm stuck on. I honestly don't know if he earned that last morning. Someone had been carrying his forgiveness the whole time, and he never once looked up. Maybe you're hearing this late, after a shift nobody clapped for. Maybe you let somebody rest today when the rules instead move them along. I wrote this one for you. I keep changing my answer on this, so I'm just going to ask you. If no one had been carrying that coin, would he have deserved to find out he was forgiven at all?